My guest today is Jonathan J., who discusses the importance of mindset in business success. He emphasises that you have to have the right mindset, including self-belief, optimism and problem-solving skills, and it's crucial to have achieving success. He also shares his journey as an entrepreneur from dropping out of university to starting his first business in personal development. He talks about the importance of acquiring businesses rather than starting from scratch and sharing his experiences of buying and selling businesses. Jonathan J. opens up about stress and challenges he's faced as a business owner and the importance of prioritising mental health and work-life balance. He concludes by discussing his future plans, including more acquisitions, seminars, and focusing on his family. This podcast will educate and inspire with stories of entrepreneurs' journey, and we also explore their why. You will learn from successes and failures to be the best version of yourself. Today we have Jonathan J., who is a deal maker, YouTuber, podcaster, author and speaker. Hello, Jonathan. How are you today?
I'm very good, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. The confession I made just before we came online was that I've actually been to one of your courses, which was about business acquisitions, buying businesses as a strategy for being able to grow wealth and be successful. Great to meet you. It's fantastic to actually have this conversation with you, to actually delve in a little bit deeper about your business model and how it's been successful in multiple areas. This is what's quite interesting, is that you've run businesses in multiple different business industries. So we're going to talk about that. But so thank you very much for joining me. The podcast is called The Absolute Business Mindset. What does a business mindset mean to you?
Well, I think mindset is everything. Everyone wants strategies and tactics and shortcuts and tricks and tips. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the right mindset, none of that will be successful. And I really do think I've been doing this for so long and talking to business owners for so long, for 25 years, that I could see if I had a lineup of business owners, I could identify just by asking them a couple of questions, who's got the right mindset and who's going to struggle. And if you've got the right mindset, that combination of self-belief and optimism and positivity and solution orientated and problem solving and all of those different things, then you're going to be way more successful than the person who is pessimistic, negative, can't solve problems, thinks the world is going to end. So having that mindset is the critical difference between success and never quite getting there.
Do you think that is relatable to careers as well as businesses? Because most of my people that listen on my show are entrepreneurs, business owners, but there is a portion that are in their own careers. Do you think that positivity and that sort of growth mindset and outlook is actually relatable both? Because I've worked in corporate for 14 years and there were some quite successful people that I wouldn't necessarily call positive or optimistic. So what's your view of people in careers versus...
Some people can work their way up through just determination and get promoted because they've held the job for a long time and stick with what you know. But yeah, without a doubt, I mean, you can, if you think about, I go to a lot of cafes because I don't have an office. I gave up my office during the pandemic. So I like to get out of the house and I go and sit in different cafes during the course of a week. And, you start comparing the customer service experience, don't you? If you do
yes.
this sort of stuff. And you realize that in some places, always greeted with a smile, that waiter really looks after you and they're far more likely to be given the tip, aren't they? Where the waiter who does the bare minimum, uses the bare minimum number of words and makes out that you're a little bit of a nuisance by interrupting them and coming into their cafe. That person, you can't imagine that person being promoted. So absolutely, mindset is going to influence your career path as much as it is going to influence your business.
Yeah, I would agree. I would 100% agree. When when I started this podcast 5.5 years ago, I was in corporate and I ended up with a strap line, which just created I created without really realizing was I said, I'm a corporate employee with an entrepreneurial mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd gone through a lot of self-development and personal development of reading books and listening to books and podcasts, really on that personal growth side. And I felt that actually it was a differentiator in the company. And you are right, in companies you can literally do your time and they will give you promotions in a lot of cases. But just on the business side, on the entrepreneur side, why did you drop out at university at 19 years old?
Because I was reading French and I wasn't very good at French. So that was part of it. And the other part was that I just couldn't imagine it was a 4-year course. I couldn't imagine doing that for 4 years. And I always knew that I wanted to be in business, and I justified it to myself that I didn't need a degree to be in business. Slightly disappointing to my parents, because I'd have been the first person in my family ever to have gone to university. But my brother and my sister followed a few years later, made up for me. I've never ever regretted it. I've never looked back and thought that's something I should have stuck with. I missed out, I think, on that network of people that you sort of carry or could carry or can carry through the rest of your life. So I missed out on that. But overall, I've never looked back and thought I shouldn't have done that.
And your first step was into business as a business owner. Why? So what was your first business that you started?
Well, my first proper business, because I did dabble a little, was actually in the world of personal development. So tying in with your mindset question, It was a magazine called the Achievement Report magazine. And actually just recently, like in the last few weeks, I bought a complete set off of eBay from someone who was a customer of mine, however many years ago that was now, in the late 90s. So I've got a complete set on my bookshelves behind me now, which is wonderful. Brings back lots of really good memories, actually. And it was one of those businesses that makes a little bit of money one month, makes a bit of a loss the next month. Yeah, it's never particularly spectacular. You keep keeping your head above water. And then someone came along and asked whether I wanted to sell it. And it was a London-based corporate training company, and they wanted to do more in personal development, which was certainly going through quite an explosion of interest at the time. This is late 90s.
Okay.
And I did the deal with them, and I made more money the day I sold the magazine than I had in the previous years of owning and running the magazine and turning up at the office 6 days a week. So an interesting lesson learned there, really, that the exit had more value to me than all the time that I was actually running the business. And running, when I say running, I mean doing. I mean turning up, sitting behind the desk, getting very stressed. I do get quite stressed about things anyway. But that was a very stressful time. So yeah, it was quite an eye opener for me.
And I love this question about selling. For your first business that you sell, was there a mistake? Did you sell it underpriced? Did you sign up for a year that you have to work with the company? What was your experience of the first sale of a business?
No, it was sold and that was it. I didn't have to do anything after that. You know, did I sell it at the right price? Well, the right price is what's on the table at the time. I mean, I don't get too hung up over, could it have been better? I'm quite detached from that. And it was absolutely the right time for me because I'd started another business that was really going great guns compared to the magazine. And I wanted to focus on that. I mean, the other business that I started, we did £1 million of revenue in the first 12 months. And this was 25 years ago when £1 million really meant something. I'm joking, of course, but I don't know what that would be in today's figures. So that was really taking off very nicely. And the magazine became a bit of a distraction. So being able to sell it wasn't just about the money at all. It was about the freedom and freeing up the headspace and the sense of obligation to that business. And interestingly, that's the way we approach business acquisitions today is all around looking for owners who value something more than money. So it's not all about getting the very best price for their business. It's about retiring. It's about looking after their health and those sorts of things.
And was that in digital marketing, the second business?
No, it wasn't. It was accredited adult education. I had seen an American company run training programs for people who wanted to learn coaching and mentoring skills. And these were for people who worked in HR departments in companies, private individuals as well, but sort of corporate training. And I was opposite the American company for 3 days at an exhibition with my magazine.
Right.
And it was a very quiet exhibition. And when an exhibition is quiet, there's not many people visiting, you spend more time talking to the people in the other stands than you do anything else.
Yeah.
So I was talking to these guys and I said, so why did you go to America for this training course? And they said, well, there isn't one here. And I remember this conversation so clearly. I looked at the person telling me this. So the only reason you went to America is because there wasn't one in London, for example, and you couldn't just go to the one in the UK. Yes. So if there had been one in the UK, you would have gone. Yes. And I started to think about this and I thought, well, I could do this because I knew from the magazine all the people who could run it.
Right.
The people who contributed to the magazine actually became my very first training team because I didn't know anything about coaching and mentoring, but I thought, well, I don't need to because it's not me running the training. Yeah. I'm getting other people to do that. So it all happened incredibly quickly. And to be fair, the timing was very good because I was not doing well financially. I was just keeping my head above water. And the very, very first training course that we ran, or rather my colleagues ran, and I just sat in the hotel reception being very nervous and hoping that everyone would enjoy it. Yeah, that was an absolute turning point financially for me. My mortgage was 3 months in arrears at that point. And as most people know, being 3 months in arrears with your mortgage is a pretty desperate situation. And I had credit cards and I had all those things that people have when the debt seems to be getting bigger and there's no way out. And that one weekend training course transformed everything. My bank manager had been away on holiday and he called me and he said, Jonathan, when I went on holiday, you were £20,000 overdrawn. You're now £20,000 in the black. Where on earth did £40,000 come from in 1 week? I said, well, I've been busy. But I thought that was a one-off. I thought it was just I didn't think of it as having any longevity. And then people phoned and the office and said, are you doing another one? So I did another one, and then another one, and another one. And those courses have now been running for nearly 25 years.
Wow. Amazing.
Not under my ownership. I sold the company years ago now, but yeah, practically 25 years later, that course that saved my financial life is still running.
That's
slightly
incredible.
Different format, different presenters, and so forth. But the core of it is there.
Why did you become an entrepreneur? What drove you when you started in publishing and adult education? What drove you to think that entrepreneurship was your path?
Well, I've got several answers to that question, depending on who's asking. Let me give you.
Well, can I have the honest one then, please?
I'll give you the answer I don't often give. Well, they're all honest, but they come at it from different angles, depending upon the conversations. In the 1980s, there was a TV show called Heart to Heart.
Oh, yeah.
Robert Wagner, Stephanie Powers, Jonathan and Jennifer Hart, and the opening and they were some private detectives. And the opening title sequence, you got Robert Wagner driving his red sports car along Miami seafront, I think it was, and you've got the sun and you've got the exciting music and the fast car. And I thought, oh my goodness, I want that. I couldn't be living further from that. I was a teenager living on the Isle of Wight. It wasn't exactly, and the Isle of Wight doesn't quite have the same exotic sunsets as so I was watching that and I was thinking, you know what, there is a different life out there. Now, as it happens, I'm the furthest you can imagine from, I don't even drive a car at the moment. So I'm not into sort of flat, I'm not sort of the Lamborghini sort of type entrepreneur at all. But as a teenager, there was something kind of inspiring about that. And my parents had always run their own business. My parents had also both been teachers. So the teaching part of what I do with the courses that I run, I like to think of myself as a decent teacher. You can take a complex subject and break it down into bite-sized chunks. But I've also maybe inherited that little bit of entrepreneurial flair that my parents had. But it's just something that I always wanted to do. I could never imagine working for someone else. And I never have. I've never had.
You've never had, even as a 16-year-old wanting to work in McDonald's or a Pizza Hut or anything. You've never worked.
I did my own thing there.
Wow.
When I was a teenager as well. Never worked for anyone else.
Okay, as we've touched on earlier, life. Tell me one thing from your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you're an online business owner and you want to learn what's working right now to generate leads, grow your following, and get paying clients and customers, then be sure to check out the Digital Trailblazer podcast. Each week, we feature online business owners just like you who are launching and scaling their businesses, and we reveal exactly what they're doing to rise above the competition to build a successful, profitable online business. And what's really unique about the Digital Trailblazer podcast is that you're going to learn these strategies directly from the business owners who are putting them into action and getting results. So head over to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, or just head over to digitaltrailblazer.com for links to all of our episodes.
Yeah, I think listening to my parents, have uncomfortable conversations about not having enough money. That's something that I won't forget. And I think that sort of that feeling of I've got to keep working. I've got to keep working. I can't stop. Actually, just even in the last month or so, my attitude towards that has started to change because, life is too short. A colleague of mine who worked for me in the company that I've just been talking about, he has just died from bowel cancer. He's 44. And, I think that we've got to get things in perspective here. Sure, money's important. We need money to live. But, we really have to realize that life is way more than just earning and working. And I got my work ethic from my parents, but you've also got to know when to stop. And I've got a 7-year-old daughter as well. So over the last 7 years, my focus has changed there as well, in that everything I do, I feel I'm doing for her. I'm not selfishly doing it for myself. So it's probably not a particularly clear answer, but you take these different influences, and it does influence what the time you are in your life right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. You remember certain things because both my parents have passed away, unfortunately. And you when you're reflecting on relationships that they had and your relationship with them, you definitely, when you're reflecting on that, you feel different emotions and different feelings about times that you had with them. And it's interesting you were saying about that money was an issue. Do you think that feeling of that you got from your parents of that they didn't have enough money to be financially free, let's say, in your earlier life, so you've been doing this 25 years, in your earlier life, was money the only measure that you could have to show whether you were successful or not?
Yeah, I think it was. Because that was the one thing that I knew that was lacking so much, and therefore that was the goal. And I remember very clearly coming home from my office and picking up a takeaway pizza on the way home, and coming back to my very nice seafront apartment, waterside apartment in Portsmouth, in Gunwharf Quays, if you know that area. And sitting on the sofa by myself, I hasten to add, the point of the story is that I'm sitting there by myself with a takeaway pizza, and I'm opening my post, and there's a letter from my bank manager saying, congratulations on passing the £1 million mark in your personal account. But you know what? I had the letter in one hand, the slice of pizza in the other, and thinking, well, I don't feel any different. Life hasn't really changed. And I should have realized then, it took me quite a few years after that to realize that I should have made some changes right at that point. Right. Because if it is all just about the money, then that's a pretty sad state of affairs. Life is way more than that. And it really is about the relationships and experiences that you have. And eating a takeaway pizza by yourself is not exactly an experience.
No, it's the journey.
Well, it is an
It's
experience,
not. It's not always the destination. It's the journey that's important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's fast forward to when I came to see you. I think it was about 2 years ago. You were talking about that you were buying preschool nurseries, so for nurseries that kids go to before school during the pandemic. And according to the notes and the research I found, you bought 48 preschool nurseries during the pandemic. Why don't you tell me about the decision to go to preschool nurseries, which is interesting, and what your strategy was buying so many so quickly?
Yeah, it was actually 53.
Okay.
I did 48 during the pandemic, 5 before. And it was just inspired by my daughter. My daughter was of nursery, I think was probably still in nursery at that point. And it was just a sector that I did a little bit of research on, put together a management team that had experience in the sector, and then set about doing a very classic buy and build. Yeah, the pandemic presented opportunity in that there were more sellers and less buyers. So we continued buying. No one else did, but more people wanted to sell. So if you think about the more sellers, less buyers, and the gap is the opportunity. But the downside of that was the uncertainty. Yeah, you had to take that leap of faith that after all the closures and the bubbles and the pingdemics, remember that, where people just weren't coming into work because they got a ping on their phone.
Yeah,
it was chaos.
Yeah,
and there was a leap of faith that everything would recover within a certain period of time. It actually took longer. Everyone took longer to recover than expected. And what had happened, because the period of the pandemic, it's about 3 years, wasn't it? It was end to end was about 3 years.
Yeah.
Those nursery children passed out the other end, and there was like new ones coming through, but they hadn't been able to join because of the pandemic. So it didn't quite return to that original performance, pre-pandemic performance. And that was actually quite interesting, because it was a combination of all of those factors really put a lot of stress on the business, an awful lot of stress. And in fact, the whole process of doing multiple acquisitions, which in itself is actually quite stressful, combined with sort of the operations of a huge business, which I was getting dragged into, and that was never the plan. I mean, I'm the least. Don't put me in charge of operations, please. That's not me at all. I'm the person who came up with the idea and says, right, let's do it. I can't do sort of day-to-day stuff particularly well at all. I actually ended up in hospital. I had stomach pains like you wouldn't believe, like pains that were crippling. I couldn't stand up straight. I had to lie down. There was one particular night I'm sure I didn't sleep all night because it was just so painful. And I was Googling it and I thought, is it appendicitis? No, that's the wrong side for appendicitis. So I was doing the self-analysis here.
Yeah.
And eventually I thought, no, I've got to go and see my doctor. So I went to the GP. She felt around and she said, right, okay, we're going to get you in for a colonoscopy. Now, out of all of the different medical procedures available, I don't think a colonoscopy is my most favorite medical procedure. So I went in for a colonoscopy and they couldn't find anything. And I thought it could be an ulcer. I thought maybe it's worse, but probably an ulcer. And they couldn't find anything, which means that it was entirely psychosomatic. It was all just everything, the stress. And, I've always considered myself a very robust individual. I've never been someone who wilts under pressure. But then maybe sometimes we overestimate what our bodies are capable of, especially as we get older. And I'm nearly 52. And, maybe when you cross that 50-year-old boundary, it does start to get to you more than before. And I thought I need to take a step back from this. So that was January 20, let me get my years right, 22. And then I started to think about how do I exit this? And again, it's when you've got children, your priorities change. I mean, my daughter brought her spellings home from school, and we were going through them for the first time, and one of the words was unhappy. And she looked at me and she said, "That's you."
Oh.
And I said, what do you think makes Daddy unhappy? And she said, work. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've just become a terrible role model here. That was not the intention at all. So I went through different sort of permutations of what deals would look like, and ended up selling to my business partner as a management buyout, if you like.
Right.
And that was now a year ago.
And how's your life changed from being under a lot of stress, a lot of strain, to selling up and...
Oh, chalk and cheese. And I'm very reflective about what I do right and what I do wrong, and what I could have done better, and what I could improve next time, and those sorts of things. And what I say to all of my clients is that it's a slippery slope when you go into a business that you've bought and solve a problem. Then you're looked at to solve the next problem. Before you know it, you're going in 1 day a week and helping people out solving problems. The 1 day a week becomes 2 days a week, 2 days a week. And before you know it, you're there all the time. And that's what happened to me. And I don't know anything about preschool education. I mean, I'm not.
So what were you doing for those 5 days when you started from 1 day as a sort of, not a consultant, but just someone who came
Helping
in
out.
Helping out? How did that progressively what were you being involved in to be?
Well, I was actually getting involved.
Days?
I was getting involved with things that were just crazy. With the benefit of hindsight, I was interviewing, or rather co-interviewing, managers.
Oh,
I don't know what a good manager looks like in that sector. I haven't got it. Why was I even doing that?
and why were you?
Because I care, and I want things to go well, and I want people to be all right. And I'm not a sort of a completely dispassionate business investor who doesn't want to do anything and just sit back and take the money. That's not me at all. But to be fair, I went too far. And my little trip to hospital was the evidence that I'd gone too far. But these days being the last 12 months, I've done lots of podcast interviews. I've had speaking engagements, which I love doing. I love doing that sort of thing. I've been running some seminars and events, doing a lot more online these days, and helping other people with their acquisitions, because, I never present myself as a guru or the perfect model of, I've had a terrible work-life balance over the years. I'm not a good example of that. Yeah, I'm a single parent. I'm not a great example of that either. But I know what works and what doesn't work, because I've made all the mistakes so that other people don't have to. So I can say, like, this is, if you want to go and buy 50 businesses, this is what you do, but this is what you don't do.
Yeah.
These are the things you need to do at the start, rather than leave it till later or whatever it might be.
It feels like the seminars, the workshops, the education piece has been important for you for a very long time, and is critical for who you are as a person, especially now. Is that right?
Yeah, I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. And, I've got a Zoom session this afternoon with some new clients I'm onboarding, and I look forward to hearing their stories. Where are they now? Where do they want to go? What do they want to achieve? I think definitely hearing I said both my parents were teachers. So hearing that sort of conversation a lot at home definitely rubbed off on me. And I love giving presentations and just talking about a subject that I'm very enthusiastic and passionate about.
Amazing. This is very clickbaity, and I apologize, but it's one of those questions that I think is going to be interest my audience if they've not heard about you and heard about your story before. I read somewhere that you purchased a business for £1. Is that true? What was the business? And tell me a little bit of backstory behind that purchase.
Oh yeah, I mean, that isn't in itself really the story, if you like, because buying a business for nothing or for a nominal amount is actually a very frequent occurrence. I mean, Chelsea Football Club was
that's true.
Sold for £1. The transferring the assets and liabilities to someone else and letting them take over what is typically a problem, and letting them solve it, and you walk away from it because you've reached the end of your skill set in solving that problem, is not an uncommon scenario at all. That's quite a normal thing to happen. But the best part of this story was I bought this. It was a group of digital marketing companies that were owned by a London-based private equity firm. And this group had languished in the portfolio for 5 years. And private equity works on typically a 5-year portfolio. And the fund closes after 5 years, everything's sold off, and then the profit is returned to the original investors and the fund managers. So it was coming up to the end of the 5 years, and they were selling everything off. And this particular business had been making a loss, but it was a substantial business. It was a 5 million revenue digital marketing business. Actually, it had been 8 or 9 million a few years earlier. So it had shrunk. And the opportunity came along to buy this for nothing. And you'll often find these opportunities. Whether you should buy for nothing or not is a completely different matter, because you've got to know what you're getting yourself into. It's not a beginner's strategy by any stretch of the imagination. And I took this business, and over an 11-month period, executed a turnaround with some pretty drastic steps. We went from nearly 100 staff down to less than 20 staff, moved offices to smaller offices, cut out lots of the product lines that weren't making any money and losing money in many cases, and just focused on the core part of the business. And then I sold that to a competitor for 1.25 million in cash, real money, exactly 11 months after buying it.
Wow.
So is that something that anyone can do? Well, yes, I guess so. But should anyone try to do it? Only if you've got a bit of experience, a bit of knowledge, you've got the right team around you. And yeah, that was a stressful 11 months. I seem to have lots of stressful periods in my life. That was a stressful 11 months as well. In fact, maybe that should be my new mantra now, that I'm going to eliminate all stress from my life and live longer. So yeah, but it's a good story because it shows what can be done.
Yeah.
If you have the knowledge and the desire. You've got to have the desire, the ambition to do it.
We'll talk about mental health in a minute, but I just want to talk to you about what's your view on mergers and acquisitions, the M&A industry as a whole?
Well, I mean, it's nothing new. I mean, private equity really started in the 1950s in the United States. Businesses have always been bought and sold, but probably only in the 1950s did it become an asset class that could be traded, like precious metals, and could be traded, or oil or gas could be traded. It's a massive because if you think about it, at some point the owner of a business has to do something with the business, either retire and close the business, pass it to their children, which to be fair is less and less likely to happen these days, or sell it. And if someone's selling, there's always going to be someone buying. So you don't hear about all these SME deals. You only really hear about the ones that the sort of the high street transactions, the Mike Ashley type deals, which in the papers. But but M&A, mergers and acquisitions, is part of business life, very much so.
Why should someone acquire a business rather than start a business?
Well, I mean, when you start a business, you might spend years just figuring out how to sell the product or service that you've thought up, or you've got an idea about. You spend years figuring out the marketing, hiring the staff, getting the office, getting the website. And usually those are years of hardship as well. I mean, not many people start a business and make money from day one, but you can do that if you buy a business. If you buy a business that's established and profitable, and I think that's the only business that you should be buying, then you're going to be making money from that very first month that you own it. And some people will say, buy a business for £1, like in our example earlier, and turn it around and be a hero. But the chances of that actually ever happening are like zero. Certainly as a beginner, they are. So buying a business that's already making money, already has marketing, staff, offices, branding, customers, and more importantly than anything else, cash flow. When it's got cash flow, that's what you should be buying, not a business that's losing money.
Right. How important is it to have domain knowledge, so experience in the industry that you're in, that you want to purchase? Yeah,
I think that if it's just going to be you, then it is important, because otherwise you don't know what you're buying, do you? You don't know whether it's good or bad or indifferent. If it's a sector that you've identified that you don't have knowledge in it, it's very easy to hire that knowledge. You don't have to have business partners. You could, but you don't have to. You can actually just rent in that knowledge. There are plenty of people who help, often people who've retired from the sector, getting bored at home and saying, I'd like to help you out because I want a new challenge. I want something to excite me, to get me out of bed in the mornings. So I do think it's important, but it's not absolutely critical. There are plenty of people that I know that buy businesses. I'm thinking of one in particular. He bought 3 manufacturing businesses totaling 8 million of annual revenue. So smallish businesses in the scheme of things, but he only works in them, or on them, I suppose is the better way of putting it, 10 hours a week, plays golf twice a week because he's got other people running them. And that's really the way to do it.
So we've touched on a couple of times, you've mentioned about being stressed. You've mentioned about your daughter saying that you had difficulty with work, her perception of you and work. What has your experience been over the 25 years with mental health?
Well, I think that entrepreneurially minded business owners always battle on, don't they? You don't typically have a duvet day as a business owner. You can't go to your boss and say, I need a couple of weeks off to myself. You can't do that because quite often you are the business and the business stops, and you can't do that. I've always considered myself a very resilient individual, but I think, a year ago, I realized that maybe I should be prioritizing things other than business, like health, like family, like my own free time, actually giving myself permission to enjoy myself doing things that I want to do. And so I think that it's, everyone, when I say everyone, I mean the media focus on employees and their mental health and how, bosses expect lots of them. What no one ever says is that those bosses expect a lot of themselves and put themselves under pressure and do the jobs of multiple people, especially startups. That's just a crazy time, isn't it? And I just think it's so important. I've got a client who had a heart attack a couple of years ago, and that was his wake up call. So his wake up call was that, no way was he ever going to get stressed. He wasn't going to if he found himself getting stressed by something, he either wasn't going to do it, or he was going to get it done differently, or not get involved. So I think that is important. And I don't think business owners, because they are a minority, don't get the voice that the majority, the employed people get.
Yeah, I agree. I've got a minor rant that I have that basically culture, society, governments don't support entrepreneurs. You're absolutely right. They will support the workers that work for large corporates or work as employees. But when it comes down to financial support, when it comes down to emotional support, the entrepreneur is not the person that's being prioritized, even though they are the backbone of Britain.
Well, they're the ones who employ.
They're the ones who employ, exactly.
Without them, if you've got business owners saying, you know what, I've just had enough, I don't want to do this anymore, and they close the business, then where are those employees going to go? Yeah. You're right. It hasn't ever been given the headlines that maybe it should do.
And it doesn't matter what flavour of government, whether it's Conservative or Labour. To be honest, neither political party, I don't necessarily want to go deep into the politics of it, but it doesn't really matter which government are in. They don't prioritise entrepreneurship, which I feel is an absolute missed opportunity to be able to do something really innovative, something really exciting for business and finances. So my mini rant is
absolutely.
No,
I agree. I mean, it seems quite remarkable that has never really happened. I know there's been different schemes to get people employed, and actually, to be fair, all the bounce back loans and everything were great during the pandemic for small businesses. But I agree. It seems to be just bursts of activity rather than a strategy.
Yeah. Okay, Jonathan, what's the future plans for Jonathan J for the next 2 to 5 years? What are you planning on doing?
Well, I reckon I've got 5 years until my daughter doesn't want to hold my hand and finds me too embarrassing. So I've got 5 years of definitely focusing on family. I've actually do have a couple of acquisitions up my sleeve, as maybe you would expect. And I love doing the training and the coaching as well. So a bit of all of those things.
Yeah, my kids are 7 and 9, two girls,
Okay.
7 and 9. And so I agree. I think I've got maybe 3 years. Once they go to secondary school and they go to get to 11, 12, that's when dads are not cool anymore.
Exactly.
It's funny. We've just recently, this last weekend has been Glastonbury. So I've been watching a bit of Glastonbury on the television, and they now sit and watch some of the things that I was watching, and they still think that I'm cool because I know that some of the bands and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, once they get to 11, 12, 13, that they won't even care what I listen to, and will be out going with their friends and stuff like that. So yeah, I think you're probably right. About 5 years you've probably got left.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be potentially more acquisitions, definitely more seminars and workshops with people, building that side of the business, and obviously being family focused. I think that's wonderful. All right, we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. The first question is, what was the best decision that you've made?
The best decision I ever made was deciding that I didn't want to work for someone else.
Did that give you, when you were starting the businesses, we've talked about starting businesses that can be quite a hurdle, a hill to get. Mm. Do you think you could have learnt, even if you worked for free for someone like you, Jonathan, who has 25 years worth of experience, do you think as an employee of a entrepreneur working, someone who's been in the business, do you think that would have helped you?
Actually, now I can reflect on my answer with an additional 30 seconds. I realize, there is definitely something advantageous to that. You know, some of the most successful people I see in business started off working for, typically a larger accountancy firm or a private equity firm, saw how it was all done. So basically, they were paid to learn, and then they went off and did it themselves.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Oh my goodness. It's got to be something around never giving up and believing in yourself. I mean, if you combine those 2 mantras, believe in yourself and never give up, that really works from a mindset perspective. Yeah, we come full loop onto mindset, which is so important. It's so important for entrepreneurs to have that right mindset. As you say, persistence, keep going, turn up every day, work hard. I always feel like, because I love Tim Ferriss, and the 4-hour work week, I think, is a truly inspiring story. But there are periods where you have to work really hard and work really diligently and do the hours in to be able to be successful. Yeah. The plan always should be to do the 4-hour week, but I think there is definitely a fluctuation on how much you need to be involved in the business as well, which I think we have covered in this conversation. Next question: who's helped you most in your career? Different people at different times, but I always remember one particular individual called Barry Fitzgerald. And if anyone knows Barry Fitzgerald, and it's the right Barry Fitzgerald, then please get him in touch with me, because I haven't been able to track the guy down. When I started that adult education business, the coaching and mentoring business in 1999, he turned up at my office with a set of sticky labels, a mailing list. And he said, this is really going to help you. He said, here's my mailing list. This is going to help you get your first customers. And it did. And I did thank him at the time, but I don't think he realized how instrumental that was in turning my financial life around. So Barry, if you're listening to this, thank you.
Amazing. And you obviously are a mentor and a coach at the moment with people that you work with. Has there ever been a coach or a mentor that's played pivotal roles in your life?
Not someone that I've ever paid, if you like, to do that. I've always had a very high regard for Brian Tracy, who's a Canadian brilliant speaker and author. And I'm a big fan of Brian Tracy. I actually put him on at an event in the UK in 2006. And I've just recently bought the DVDs of that off of eBay. I found someone had the DVDs. I didn't have them anymore. And I was watching it the other day and thinking, yeah, that was an incredible event. And he's an incredible speaker. Yeah. And anything by Brian Tracy is good.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Tell me about a regret that you have.
Not being particularly good at keeping in touch with people. So if I'd kept all the business cards that I'd collected over the years and sent people an email once a month saying anything I can do to help, this is what I'm up to. And instead of collecting business cards, they move around the bedroom after you take them out of your pockets when you get undressed in the evening and they end up in the bin. If I'd saved those, put them into some sort of database, just an Excel spreadsheet, sent everyone an email once a month, I could have built an incredible network over my business career. And I regret not doing that. It's never too late to start, but I regret not doing that sooner.
Amazing. I think we all, the people who network are sometimes a little bit susceptible to, you get a little bit of, I don't know if it's fatigue or you get too many people in your circle and you have to be quite choosy about the people that you actually want to spend the time with. So I would agree with that. What are you most proud of?
My daughter. Best deal I ever did.
And she's 7, is she? You said she's 7?
7, yes.
Fantastic. And leading on from children, what does legacy mean to you?
That's a good question. I don't really have a particularly good answer. I care less and less about what the outside world think. And I'm more interested in what friends and family think. And, you just want to be the best friend, the best dad, don't you? Best brother, that you can possibly be. So I don't have any sort of particularly lofty ideas around legacy. I just want to, do the best I can while I'm here.
And just something because I was just thinking about the legacy of the businesses that you've acquired and then sold. When you sell them, are you always selling them with the intention that someone will buy and maintain that business long term? Or have you in the past sold knowing that they're going to break it up and create it into other businesses and sell bits and pieces of? What's your view on?
I can't get hung up on what someone else is going to do in the future. It's like when you sell your house. You're not going to lay in bed at night worrying about whether they built an extension or painted the front door a different color. I mean, what they do with it once they bought it is entirely up to them. So I don't think about that at all as it happens. I'm very proud of the coaching academy business, coming up at the end of this year to its 25th year in business.
That's brilliant.
But I'm actually incredibly proud of that. Just one idea that I had at my living room table turned into something that has trained tens of thousands of people all around the world. I wonder whether they'll invite me to the 25th anniversary party.
Maybe. They should do.
Will see.
Look, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today. Last question. If people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the only social media I'm on. My YouTube channel, so Jonathan J, type Jonathan J into YouTube. I should pop up fairly near the top. I've got over 200 videos on buying a business, all very different, lots of interviews with people who've been there and done it, or connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan, today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed, from someone who's sat in your audience and listened to your teachings, to actually then have this conversation has been really amazing. Absolute pleasure to have you on my show. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you very much indeed.